What kind of person walks into a room and demands to be carried above the crowd like a modern-day monarch, only to be told, flatly and unapologetically, absolutely not? Meghan Markle did just that. At the 93rd Annual Hollywood Christmas Parade, no less. A festive, family-centric event that draws floats, marching bands, and B-list celebrities dressed in Santa hats, not royal palanquins and velvet drama. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And yet, here we are. This wasn't just another red carpet moment gone wrong. It wasn't a simple celebrity faux pas. This was something else entirely. Something that peeled back the final veneer of Meghan's carefully curated public persona. Something that revealed, with stunning clarity, just how wide the gap has grown between who she thinks she is and how Hollywood now sees her. Let's not sugarcoat it. Meghan reportedly asked, some sources say demanded, to be carried through the crowd on a custom-made, gold-fringed palanquin at one of Los Angeles' most nostalgic public events. She envisioned herself perched above the masses, flanked by male attendants in coordinated uniforms, waving softly to the public below like a queen in exile. A queen reclaiming her throne. But Hollywood didn't clap. They blinked. They recoiled. Then they leaked. And within 72 hours, Meghan's Queen of the Parade fantasy spiraled into a meme-fueled disaster, complete with booing crowds, high-profile snubs, and a hot mic moment so cutting it practically singed the internet. But before we dive into what exactly happened on that fateful day and the media firestorm that followed, we have to ask a deeper question. Why now? Why would someone with Meghan's media savvy, someone who's navigated royal protocols, Netflix contracts, and paparazzi flashbulbs, risk it all for a stunt so wildly tone-deaf, so egregiously out of touch, that even her most loyal defenders were left in stunned silence? Could this be the ultimate symptom of a deeper identity crisis? A craving for adulation so intense that rejection feels like betrayal? Or is this just who Meghan has become? A woman so obsessed with being seen, celebrated, exalted, that she no longer recognizes when the spotlight has turned from warm to blinding? Let's rewind. Just 1 year earlier, Meghan had walked the carpet at the Variety Power of Women Gala with understated elegance. Her speech, while polished and vague, hinted at rebirth, legacy, and the importance of owning your story. She wore neutral tones. She smiled at all the right moments. And Hollywood, mostly, played along. But 2025 wasn't kind to Meghan. Her Netflix projects were repeatedly delayed. Her lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, launched to confusion and then silence. Her podcast revival fizzled after a single episode. And despite landing a minor speaking slot at a sustainability summit in Copenhagen, headlines focused more on what she wore than what she said. The aura was fading. Fast. So when Meghan's name appeared on the official guest list for the Hollywood Christmas Parade, a wholesome, decades-old tradition known more for inflatable reindeer than royal theatrics, insiders were surprised. And yet, behind the scenes, preparations had already begun. According to multiple sources close to the organizing committee, Meghan's team submitted a rider, yes, like rock stars do, requesting enhanced staging options. That phrase would become infamous in the days to come, because enhanced staging, as it turns out, meant a hand-carried, velvet-draped palanquin, complete with gold-trimmed handles and 6 muscular male attendants in tailored uniforms. It also meant additional security, lighting considerations, and, perhaps most controversially, an exemption from walking. She didn't want to be seen walking, one organizer confided, under condition of anonymity. She wanted to appear. There's a difference. Why? Because in Meghan's mind, walking was too ordinary, too accessible, too mortal. This was supposed to be a moment of reclaiming grandeur, a visual metaphor that screamed, I may not be in Buckingham Palace, but I'm still royalty. What she didn't anticipate, however, was Hollywood's shifting tide. Gone are the days when diva behavior is brushed off as eccentric charm. Today's audience demands humility, authenticity, stars who walk among us, not above us. And so, when the palanquin request landed on the committee's desk, the reaction was immediate. First came laughter, then awkward silence, then panic. One member allegedly joked, "Does she want us to carry Harry too?" Or will he be following behind like a footman? Another, more serious, asked, "Is this some kind of prank?" It wasn't. It was real. It was earnest. And it was non-negotiable until it was. Because when the committee pushed back, citing both safety concerns and the event's core mission of community engagement, Meghan's team reportedly doubled down. She sees herself as elevated, said a former associate who once worked on Meghan's staff. Literally and figuratively. She believes the world just hasn't caught up to that vision yet. But the world wasn't catching up. It was turning. And fast. By the time news of the request leaked to a mid-tier entertainment blog, complete with design mock-ups and quotes from 3 anonymous sources, the damage was already done. The story exploded across Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, and YouTube. It was dissected by gossip channels, roasted by comedians, and meme-ified within hours. One viral tweet read, "Meghan Markle wants to be carried through a parade on a palanquin. Marie Antoinette is shaking." And yet, amid the laughter and outrage, a darker tone began to take hold. Because this wasn't just a diva request. This was symbolic. Symbolic of a woman who had once spoken of female empowerment and humility, now demanding to be lifted by men as children waved from the sidewalk below. Symbolic of the growing rift between Meghan's carefully constructed image of social justice advocacy and the reality of her increasingly imperial behavior. Symbolic of how out of touch some celebrities, particularly those with royal titles and Netflix deals, had become. And for Meghan, the fallout was swift. Sponsors began pulling out. At least 2 co-stars from her upcoming streaming project privately voiced concern about continuing the partnership. One even requested to be edited out of the joint press materials entirely. Hollywood, it seemed, had finally begun saying the word no, and Meghan wasn't taking it well. Because what came next wasn't a humble walk through the parade, waving graciously and laughing off the drama. No, what came next was defiance. A carefully choreographed appearance. A fake smile hiding gritted teeth. A crowd that turned from curious to hostile in seconds. And just when Meghan thought she could salvage the moment, a mic caught her saying something she would never live down. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because before the mic, before the memes, and before the now infamous boos from the bleachers, something else happened. A scene, behind closed doors, that would set the entire scandal ablaze. And it started with 4 simple words. Why not me then? Why not me then? That question, breathless, bitter, and defiant, wasn't just a reaction. It was a worldview, a mantra, the phrase that had quietly fueled Meghan Markle for years. But when she uttered it behind closed doors after being denied her parade palace fantasy, it didn't come off as righteous or empowered. It came off as petulant, desperate, out of step with the image she'd so meticulously curated. Let's rewind the lens. Before she was the Duchess of Sussex, before she was a royal renegade, a podcast host, a Montecito brand builder, a philanthropic speaker in high heels, Meghan Markle was something else entirely. She was an actress, not a superstar, not an icon. Just an actress, a hardworking, ambitious, B-list performer who clawed her way into cable television with persistence and polish, who knew how to read a room, modulate her tone, and flash the right smile at the right moment, who memorized not just lines but people, powerful people. And that's where it all began. Hollywood is a land of dreamers. But Meghan wasn't just dreaming of fame. She was dreaming of elevation, of transformation, of crossing the line between seen and revered. So when she met Prince Harry at Soho House, through the ever-whispered presence of Marcus Anderson, she didn't just fall in love. She saw a bridge, a portal, to power, to permanence, to a type of fame that isn't auditioned for, it's inherited. And for a time, she got it. Windsor Castle, Frogmore Cottage, state dinners, an international title, a wedding watched by 29 million people. But titles, as she would soon learn, do not guarantee loyalty from the media, the monarchy, or the masses. Meghan's time within the royal family was stormy, dramatic, and meticulously documented by both mainstream press and her own words. She painted herself as the outsider, the misunderstood heroine, the woman of color breaking down ancient barriers. And to many, that version was compelling. But something shifted after the infamous Oprah interview, after the Spotify drama, after Netflix handed her the platform. And she delivered a story where she emerged not just as misunderstood, but persecuted. The narrative was no longer about building bridges. It was about burning old ones. And Hollywood? Hollywood was watching. Because here's the dirty little secret Meghan didn't count on. In the land of make-believe, people are far more interested in who you are now than who you were then. And in 2025, Meghan Markle was no longer the fresh face of royal rebellion. She was becoming something else. She was becoming exhausting. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you saw Meghan headline a major film? A hit podcast? A widely celebrated philanthropic endeavor? Exactly. Instead, headlines were filled with whispers about production delays, about ghosted business partners, about sponsors quietly pulling back, about brands hedging their bets. Her lifestyle line, American Riviera Orchard, was supposed to be her Gwyneth Paltrow moment. But the debut was baffling. A mix of jam jars, vague quotes about wellness, and an Instagram that felt more curated than candid. The press was confused. The audience was indifferent. And Meghan? Meghan was frustrated. You could see it in the way she doubled down on luxury events. The way she inserted herself into conversations that weren't hers to lead. The way she floated through gala carpets like she was being photographed for history, when in reality, the headlines barely noticed. So when the invitation to the 93rd annual Hollywood Christmas parade arrived, it must have felt beneath her. Let's be honest. The parade is not the Oscars. It's not Cannes. It's not the Emmys. It's candy canes, Nickelodeon stars, and retro nostalgia. But for Meghan, this was an opportunity. Not to support a community event, not to blend in with the crowd, but to recast herself as untouchable, as regal, as the main event. Why? Because the audience had stopped applauding. And Meghan couldn't stand the silence. You have to understand, for Meghan, identity has always been performance. Her roles, on screen, in the palace, on the talk show circuit, have all shared a common thread. She doesn't just want to be admired. She wants to be believed. Believed as the underdog. Believed as the visionary. Believed as the wronged woman who rose anyway. But what happens when that belief begins to fracture? When even your own allies begin to wonder if you've started believing your own performance too much. That's exactly what was brewing inside her Montecito estate in the weeks leading up to the parade. Multiple insiders, some former staff, some quietly navigating PR circles, noted a shift. She wasn't strategizing anymore. She was fantasizing. The palanquin idea didn't come from a joke. It came from a vision board. Literally. According to a source with knowledge of the internal planning meetings, Meghan had begun collecting imagery. Cleopatra, Queen Rania, Lady Gaga in her meat dress, even Beyoncé's 2018 Coachella entrance. Symbols of spectacle. Symbols of dominance. She wanted a moment, the source said. Not just a photo op. A moment. One that would trend, disrupt, shake things up. And when she floated the idea to her inner circle, no one dared say no. Because that's the other piece no one talks about. Meghan doesn't surround herself with critics. She surrounds herself with curators. People who will take her wildest vision and figure out how to dress it in PR-friendly language. That's how palanquin became enhanced staging. That's how a borderline imperial entrance became a nod to her global heritage. That's how the press release almost read, paying homage to global traditions of procession and celebration. Until someone finally stepped in and said, "What are we doing?" But by then, the request had been submitted. And Meghan? She was already rehearsing her wave. So there she was, Meghan Markle, actress turned royal turned media mogul, preparing to be paraded down Hollywood Boulevard like a sovereign goddess on a golden litter. Only this wasn't ancient Thebes, and she wasn't Cleopatra. This was 2025 Los Angeles. The land of performative humility, PR landmines, and a public growing ever more allergic to ostentation dressed up as empowerment. And when the committee overseeing the parade opened the proposal packet, when they saw the digital renderings of the palanquin, the outline for a custom heritage procession, and the list of demands for Meghan's personal security team, the collective response wasn't admiration. It was stunned silence. Then confusion. Then discomfort. Was this satire? One committee member reportedly asked. Another whispered, "Are we really doing this?" Because here's what Meghan's team failed to grasp. The Hollywood Christmas parade isn't about grand entrances. It's about community. It's about affordability, accessibility, local pride. It's about school marching bands and retired soap stars and Santa Claus on a float sponsored by a regional plumbing company. It's about families sitting on folding chairs, eating street tacos, waving at Dancing with the Stars alumni, and clapping for animal shelters. It's not about royalty. But Meghan didn't see that, or didn't care. For her, this was a stage. A chance to assert, visually, symbolically, that she still mattered. That her crown, though invisible, still carried weight. Let's pause here for a moment. Because this isn't just about one outrageous request. It's about a pattern. A pattern of trying to outdazzle the very institutions she once claimed to reject. Meghan left the royal family, she told us, because she wanted privacy, freedom, and space to grow. And yet, what followed was a flurry of interviews, brand deals, and media appearances that often felt less like liberation and more like strategic coronation. She didn't disappear from the public eye. She rebranded herself, not as a private citizen, but as a better royal. One without rules. One without scrutiny. One who could curate the spotlight on her own terms. Except she couldn't, because public favor isn't programmable. It's not an algorithm. It's a mood. And the mood toward Meghan in 2025? It was complicated, fading, frustrated, particularly in Hollywood, the very city she once counted on to embrace her as one of their own. Executives began to murmur that working with her was too high maintenance. PR reps whispered that she was becoming unrelatable. Even stylists were said to be hesitant. Concerned that collaborating with Meghan meant being pulled into the orbit of a woman who couldn't decide if she was selling jam, leading a revolution, or launching her next streaming docuseries. And that tension, that sense of slipping influence, was what made the palanquin request feel so desperate. This wasn't just a diva demand. It was a Hail Mary, a grand gesture designed to snatch back the narrative. She would descend into the heart of Hollywood, lifted on the shoulders of adoring attendants, waving regally like she was born to rule. The cameras would flash, the headlines would scream, the applause would swell. And just like that, the Meghan myth would be reborn. But reality had other plans. When the committee issued their formal rejection, it wasn't dramatic. It was polite, professional, but firm. They cited logistics, liability, brand integrity. Translation? You've misunderstood what this event is and what it isn't. Meghan's team pushed back, insisted, even offered to pay for all modifications, security enhancements, and media accommodations. But the answer remained no. And that's when it happened. The moment that sparked the now infamous phrase. In a heated meeting, behind a heavy oak door inside a Beverly Hills office, Meghan stood, voice rising, eyes flaring, and said, "Why not me then? Not as a joke, not as a question, but as a challenge. Why not her? After all she'd endured. After the criticism, the press attacks, the betrayal from her own in-laws. After the Netflix exposés, the charity galas, the relentless push to reclaim her image. Why couldn't she have this? Why couldn't she rise above the noise, quite literally, and be seen again? It wasn't about ego, she told them. It was about symbolism. It was about showing little girls that they too could be lifted, even after being torn down. It was about power, beauty, reclamation. Except no one in the room was buying it. And that silence? It cut deeper than any tabloid headline. Because for the first time in a long time, Meghan realized something. They weren't just saying no to the palanquin. They were saying no to her. No to the myth. No to the pageantry. No to the idea that fame must always bend to self-invented royalty. And for someone whose entire public arc had been built on calculated ascension, that rejection wasn't just inconvenient. It was existential. So what did she do? She stormed out. Furious. Humiliated. Determined to salvage something, anything, from the wreckage. But what she didn't know was that her most humiliating moment hadn't happened yet. Because out there, in the crowd, in the press, in the very air of Hollywood Boulevard, a reckoning was waiting. The kind that couldn't be spin-doctored. The kind that couldn't be carried. Because when parade day came, Meghan walked. And the crowd did not welcome her with open arms. What happened next would become legend. And it all started with 3 chilling words. Yacht. Princess. Leave. How does an idea so outlandish, so wildly disconnected from reality, even take shape in the first place? Who wakes up, looks in the mirror, and says, "This year, for the Christmas parade, I will not walk. I will be carried. Was it a fantasy that had long simmered beneath the surface? Or a last-ditch spectacle designed to shock a city that no longer cared? Let's go back to where it all began, to the inception of the palanquin plan. It didn't start with gold. It started with control. In the months leading up to the 93rd annual Hollywood Christmas parade, Meghan Markle's public narrative was fraying at the edges. Her lifestyle brand was languishing, her podcast reboot was stuck in pre-production limbo, and her Netflix-backed documentary follow-up to Harry and Meghan was reportedly on hold after creative disagreements. But behind the scenes, she was restless, and restlessness, for Meghan, has always meant reinvention. According to a member of her former team, someone who'd worked with her in the early Netflix negotiations, Meghan had grown increasingly obsessed with optics in 2025. The word came up constantly in meetings. Not messaging, not meaning. Optics. What would it look like? How would it photograph? Could it trend? She wasn't just curating an image. She was constructing a mythos, one in which she didn't merely return to the spotlight, but ascended. Higher, sharper, untouchable. And the Hollywood Christmas parade? It was perfect. Family-friendly, widely televised, nostalgic, held on her own turf, and more importantly, something the royals would never participate in. This could be her moment, her own jubilee, her victory lap, without the firm, without protocol, and without needing a crown to prove her worth. But walking? In a parade? Under the same sun as influencers and aging sitcom actors? Absolutely not. So came the brainstorming session. At first, it was subtle. Meghan allegedly floated ideas about elevated presence, then about a custom float, then, according to two independent sources, about a possible throne. Yes, throne, built into a moving platform. It would have ivy, gold leaf, maybe doves, something symbolic. But then, someone showed her a reference image. A Vogue editorial from the early 2000s. Naomi Campbell, poised atop a golden palanquin carried by shirtless male models, photographed for maximum opulence. And something clicked. She wasn't just inspired. She was ignited. That, she reportedly told her stylist, is exactly the vibe. But vibes, as it turned out, came with blueprints. Meghan's team began working with a private LA event design firm to flesh out the concept. The early mock-ups were striking. A white and gold lacquered carriage, hand-carved wood, velvet canopy, subtle spotlights, and a staircase that folded down for her entrance and exit. It would be carried by 6 uniformed attendants, carefully selected for symmetry and physical strength. The instructions? No one taller than Meghan. Facial hair optional. Must be camera-friendly. But the real twist? The palanquin wasn't just for effect. It had talking points. In one internal document leaked after the scandal broke, the spectacle was described as an homage to the enduring power of women through history, from Egyptian queens to modern leaders. The palanquin was meant to represent resilience, royalty redefined, a symbol of sovereignty earned, not inherited. You read that right. The very platform on which she was to be literally carried was being marketed as a metaphor for female empowerment. Let that irony sit with you for a moment. Because Meghan had long styled herself as the anti-monarch, the woman who walked away from outdated systems of deference and power, who gave up castles and tiaras for freedom and authenticity. And now, she was planning to have herself paraded above Los Angeles, borne on the shoulders of uniformed men, while children and middle-class families clapped from behind metal barricades. The disconnect wasn't just bold. It was historic. But here's the kicker. She didn't think it would be controversial. In fact, according to insiders, Meghan believed this moment would break the internet in a good way. She saw the palanquin not as self-aggrandizing, but as artistic, feminist, disruptive in a meaningful way. To her, this was performance art. To everyone else, it was a red flag dipped in gold leaf and dipped again in ego. And when her team formally submitted the request to the Hollywood Christmas Parade Planning Committee, it wasn't done quietly. It came with a full deck, a PowerPoint presentation. Slide 1. Vision, a modern monarch's procession. Slide 2. Design inspiration, Cleopatra meets California chic. Slide 3. Empowerment through elevation. Slide 4. Logistics, carriage specs plus path analysis. Slide 5. Media impact projection, viral trajectory model. Yes, that's real. The woman who once cried on Oprah about wanting a simple life was now commissioning a viral trajectory model for her parade entrance. But what she didn't model for was backlash. It hit the committee like a golden brick. The PowerPoint, the tone, the sheer audacity of the proposal. Not even the Rose Parade had seen something so wildly Baroque. And that parade literally features floats made of crushed flower petals and fire-breathing dragons. But this? A human-powered procession for a Hollywood celebrity? And not just any celebrity. One who had spent years publicly lambasting royal formality, positioning herself as a woman of the people, a crusader for simplicity, authenticity, and emotional transparency. To say the request was off-brand was an understatement. It was a contradiction so blinding, so theatrical, that it practically screamed satire. The reaction among committee members ranged from amusement to panic. One source recalled that the room burst into a kind of stunned laughter, the kind where you're not sure if you're being punked. Another said, there was a moment of silence that lasted just a beat too long. It felt like the moment before someone decides whether they're about to say no or lose their job. It wasn't just the palanquin that raised red flags. It was the surrounding demands. Meghan would not walk any portion of the route. The camera crews assigned to cover the parade must agree to focus on her entrance. All accompanying music must be tastefully regal. She requested a chamber-style instrumental of This Little Light of Mine. The men carrying her must be ethnically diverse and dressed in tailored earth-toned uniforms evoking heritage without implying servitude. Let's pause there. Did she really try to request diverse attendants carrying her through Hollywood, with a string quartet version of her wedding processional playing in the background? Yes, she did. And this, perhaps more than anything else, was what triggered the committee's hard no. Because it wasn't just ego. It was a tone-deaf misfire of staggering proportions. In an era where public figures are called out for even the slightest displays of privilege, Meghan's plan didn't just flirt with elitism. It practically belly-flopped into it. Behind closed doors, one board member reportedly said, "This isn't just a bad idea. It's radioactive." And it was about to leak. Because in Hollywood, nothing stays secret, especially when the story is this surreal and the subject is Meghan Markle. According to several insiders, the leak came from within. Not from a bitter aide or an outside critic, but from someone inside the event's planning team. Someone who saw the proposal, felt the weight of its absurdity, and decided the public had a right to know. They didn't go to Variety or The Hollywood Reporter. They went to a mid-tier celebrity gossip blog with a reputation for satire, scandal, and staying just inside the legal lines, the kind of site that thrives on chaotic exclusives. And within hours, the headline hit. Exclusive. Meghan Markle demands to be carried through Hollywood parade like Queen Cleopatra. No walking, just worship. The article featured blurry screenshots of the presentation deck, mock-ups of the palanquin, bullet-pointed rider demands, and a single quote from an anonymous insider. She genuinely thinks this is empowering. It's beyond parody. The story spread like wildfire. Within minutes, #PalanquinGate was trending on X. By lunch, Queen Meghan memes were everywhere. From Cleopatra side-by-sides to photoshopped Game of Thrones scenes with Meghan atop the Iron Throne, being carried through Target. But the most damaging content didn't come from memes. It came from commentary. Commentators, especially female ones, started pointing out the hypocrisy. How do you claim you left the monarchy to live a humble life? One influencer asked in a now viral clip. And then turn around and commission 6 men to carry you through the streets of LA like a Fabergé egg. The phrase self-appointed queen began appearing in headlines. Late-night hosts sharpened their monologues. Comedians joked about ordering a palanquin for brunch. And Meghan? She was not amused. According to a Montecito neighbor, Meghan completely shut down for 2 days following the leak. Staff were told not to mention the parade. Phone calls went unanswered. Only her inner circle, or what was left of it, had access. But silence doesn't fix PR infernos. So Meghan pivoted. She didn't apologize, she recalibrated. She issued a vague, poetic Instagram story, later deleted, that read, "Women have always been carried, in sorrow, in strength, in story. Let us choose how we rise." A second post featured a quote from Maya Angelou. The internet rolled its eyes. Because at this point, It wasn't just the plan that was being mocked, it was the disconnect, the sheer inability to read the room. And just when it seemed like Meghan might quietly withdraw from the event altogether, like she might disappear and let the story cool, her team shocked everyone. They confirmed her attendance, but not on a float, not in a car, not on a palanquin. Meghan would be walking. Yes, walking. Not for empowerment, not for humility, but because there was no other option left. The committee had stripped her of all special requests. Every single one. She would arrive like everyone else. She would participate like everyone else. And in doing so, she would stand alone. But not in the way she imagined. Because behind her, no attendants would march. No music would swell. No crown would glint in the California sun. What followed her instead was something no PR team could spin away. A crowd, a camera, and a chorus of voices that didn't chant her name. They booed it. And that's where we go next. Because the palanquin may have been denied, but the real spectacle was still to come. It wasn't the rejection that hurt. It was the audacity of being rejected. Meghan Markle, former royal, Netflix darling, self-fashioned cultural force, was told no by a committee of local event organizers. Not Buckingham Palace, not Parliament, not a global charity summit, but a board of middle-aged volunteers, logistics managers, and seasonal parade staff. To her, it was unthinkable. It wasn't just a bruise to the ego. It was an existential crisis wrapped in candy cane lights and commercial jingles. And that's when the walls inside the Montecito estate reportedly shook, not from earthquakes or paparazzi drones, but from the fury of a woman who had been publicly and unapologetically denied her throne. Let's set the scene. The morning after the leak, after the memes, the Twitter pile-ons, the TikToks, the podcast shade, Meghan's household staff were on high alert. The usual flow of scented candles, silk robes, and wellness playlists was replaced by heavy silence. The air, thick with tension. Multiple insiders, including 2 separate sources familiar with the event, say that Meghan called an emergency meeting with her senior team just before noon. The goal? Salvage the narrative, regain control, reclaim the spectacle. But instead of strategy, there was shouting. Why not me then? The phrase exploded in the room like a firework dipped in gasoline. She wasn't asking for advice. She wasn't inviting feedback. She was daring someone to justify the rejection, to explain how, after walking away from the British royal family, enduring global scrutiny, giving emotionally raw interviews, creating content about mental health, racism, feminism, identity, she could still be treated like a regular person in her own city. She didn't say, "I understand." She didn't say, "Let's find a middle ground." She said, "Do they even know who I am?" And that question wasn't rhetorical. It was bitter, raw, defensive, because that's what this moment had become for Meghan. Not just a media gaffe or logistical failure, but a threat to the very foundation of her post-royal brand. Let's rewind slightly. In the weeks leading up to the parade, Meghan had reportedly told associates, including a well-known celebrity stylist, that this was going to be her Marilyn moment. A cinematic, timeless image that would be replayed for years. The palanquin wasn't just transportation. It was symbolism of her rise, of her power, of the story she was writing, even if the press refused to print it. And now, that story had collapsed. Instead of glamour, there was embarrassment. Instead of reverence, ridicule. And worse, instead of silence from her critics, there was laughter, mockery. Something Meghan has always seen as the ultimate betrayal. According to one team member, what followed in the emergency meeting was a tirade. Equal parts rage and desperation. Meghan allegedly accused the committee of sabotage, claimed the media twisted the story, and insisted this was part of a broader pattern of character assassination. There was finger-pointing, finger-wagging, rumors of tears, and, most chillingly, a moment where she turned to one PR advisor and asked, flatly, "What's the point of having all this influence if they can still say no?" That line struck like thunder. Because it wasn't about the parade anymore. It was about the loss of narrative, the unraveling of control, the reality that in 2025, after all the podcasts, the Netflix documentaries, the branding, the speeches, the stylists, the leaks, the rebrands, Meghan's name no longer guaranteed obedience. It merely guaranteed headlines. But not the kind she wanted. Not adoring ones. Not ones that called her an icon, but ones that mocked, that doubted, that dissected every move for contradiction. And that, perhaps more than any rejection, was what drove her to the edge. A close acquaintance described the day as volatile, not physically, but emotionally. Meghan reportedly stormed from the meeting, retreated to her private wing, and went completely silent. Hours passed. Staff were instructed to postpone all non-urgent calls. Security detail was tightened. No one from Netflix or Spotify was to be contacted without direct approval. One member of her team quietly described the home's energy as eerie, like the quiet before a hurricane. And yet, behind that silence, plans were already shifting. Because while Meghan fumed in Montecito, her husband, Prince Harry, was in a very different headspace. According to sources, Harry had been deeply unsettled by the palanquin proposal from the beginning. He reportedly asked his wife during an early planning session, "Do we have to go that big?" She had brushed it off, told him it was strategic, that it was part of the reframe. But now, in the fallout, Harry wasn't angry. He was worried. He saw what was happening, not just to the press narrative, but to Meghan herself. The obsession with optics, the growing sense of isolation, the idea that she needed to be elevated above the crowd, literally, to feel valued again. It scared him, not because he disagreed with her desire for control. He'd walked away from the monarchy for that very reason. But because he could see where this road was leading, not to freedom, to entrapment, an identity so tightly wound around perception it couldn't breathe, couldn't bend, couldn't even walk. Harry reportedly approached Meghan gently that same evening, encouraged her to attend the parade regardless. Without the palanquin, without the spectacle, just her. "Let them see you walk," he said. "Let them see you real." Her reply? Silence. Then finally, they wouldn't understand. To Meghan, walking wasn't strength. It was surrender, and that belief was her undoing. Because what she didn't know, as she sat in that silent wing of her multi-million-dollar estate, was that outside her gates, the mockery was only just beginning. And when she finally emerged, forced to walk, forced to smile, forced to perform on someone else's terms, the crowd would let her know exactly how far she had fallen. Because just when Meghan thought she had hit the low point, a single hot mic moment would shatter her illusion completely. So what do you do when the stage you built for yourself crumbles? What happens when the audience you thought would applaud you instead begins to laugh? That's the crossroads Meghan Markle found herself at in the days following her infamous palanquin denial. But this wasn't just a PR disaster. It was a psychological turning point. The moment the crown she wore in her mind slipped, cracked, and fell to the floor. And when she picked it up, something inside her had changed. According to two sources familiar with her team's mood, the days following the meltdown were filled with frantic activity. Not recovery, reinvention. The plan now? Pivot, spin, reclaim the moral high ground. If Meghan couldn't rise physically above the crowd, then she'd rise emotionally, intellectually, symbolically. The new pitch? Grace through humility. Let the others joke. Let the bloggers meme. Let the tabloids circle like vultures. Meghan would walk. She would walk. She would smile. And she would outshine the narrative by looking poised, serene, untouched. A royal with no throne, yet still radiating regality. It was a neat idea, but reality had something else in store. Because while her team raced to reframe the disaster, drafting new press releases, reaching out to sympathetic journalists, and even considering a possible last-minute Vogue column to contextualize the misunderstanding, the crowd in Los Angeles was preparing for her arrival. And they weren't buying the spin. It started on social media. Videos circulated of attendees rehearsing chants, teenagers making signs, parents joking about the palanquin princess. A group of college students went viral for creating a parody float on the back of a pickup truck titled, "The Duchess of Delusion." The narrative was no longer under Meghan's control. It belonged to the people now. And yet, on parade day, she emerged. Meghan stepped onto the scene wearing a pristine ivory coat, sleek gloves, and her signature soft curls. Her smile was tight, her eyes masked behind oversized sunglasses. Beside her walked Harry, looking more like a security escort than a husband, tense, silent, observant. There was no music for her, no procession, no soft instrumental of "This Little Light of Mine." Only the sound of footsteps and murmurs, and then booing, soft at first, then sharper, then unmistakable. From the South Side bleachers, "We want Santa, not Sussex." From a group near the El Capitan, "Where's your palanquin, Meghan?" And then the one that echoed loudest, not because of volume, but because of timing. "Yacht Princess leave." Meghan's smile cracked. A twitch of the jaw, a flicker of the eyes. She looked to Harry, who nodded, barely, and they continued. But that wasn't the moment that broke the internet. That came 14 seconds later. Because, as fate would have it, Meghan walked past a broadcast camera with a hot mic left active by a local station intern, the kind of mistake that becomes folklore. And what she said would be looped, remixed, captioned, and replayed more than any interview she'd ever done. Caught under her breath, lips barely moving, she muttered, "This is beneath me." 6 words. 6 deadly words. Not shouted, not screamed, not even confirmed at first, but crisp enough for audio engineers to enhance. And oh, did they? Within hours, the clip hit YouTube. Within a day, it hit TikTok, millions of views. Reaction videos. International coverage. Commentary from every corner of the internet. Some fans defended her, claimed she was speaking about the event logistics, or that the clip was edited maliciously. But the damage was done, because the world wanted to believe she said it. And more dangerously, they believed she meant it. This wasn't Meghan the trailblazer. This wasn't Meghan the humanitarian. This was Meghan, scowling behind sunglasses at families and Christmas lights, seething that her moment had been spoiled. The hashtag beneath Meghan trended globally within 24 hours. One user wrote, "You left the palace to escape tradition, and now you're mad you can't be carried through a parade." Got it. Another, "Imagine being so obsessed with optics you forget people can hear you." Even Hollywood insiders, usually diplomatic, began to grumble. One TV producer tweeted, then deleted, "I passed on her project last year. Now I sleep very well." But perhaps the most telling reaction? Silence. Silence from Oprah. Silence from Tyler Perry. Silence from even the most sympathetic media voices who had once rallied to Meghan's side during her royal wars. Because this wasn't a palace injustice. This was a PR misfire so personal, so unrelatable, it defied spin. And inside Meghan's estate, the spiral deepened. She reportedly refused all interview requests, even the softball ones. Canceled 2 upcoming events, citing schedule conflicts. Postponed filming on her next lifestyle series indefinitely. And withdrew entirely from the planned holiday charity drive that had been meant to coincide with the parade. A move that earned fresh headlines. Meghan ghosts holiday philanthropy after parade scandal. But the worst part? The realization that the very moment she thought would define her comeback had sealed her exile. Because in the eyes of many, even some former fans, Meghan had crossed a line. Not one of protocol, one of humanity. She wasn't out of touch. She was out of reach. And now? Now she was walking, not into glory, but into a reckoning she couldn't control. A reckoning that would soon reach Buckingham Palace. And what happened there would be even colder than the booze on Hollywood Boulevard. Some scandals ignite with headlines, others with whispers. But the one that detonated Meghan Markle's Hollywood parade catastrophe into full-blown chaos? It began with a single email. One no one was meant to see. One that was never supposed to leave the quiet, wood-paneled confines of a private boardroom on Wilshire Boulevard. And yet, within days, it was everywhere. It wasn't the memes, the booze, or even the hot mic moment that broke the story open. Those were the flames. The email was the accelerant. And it wasn't leaked by a hater, a troll, or a rival celebrity. No, it was leaked by someone inside the machine. Someone who had watched the events unfold from a front row seat and finally said, "Enough. Let's rewind 3 days." The Hollywood Christmas Parade Committee, a group known more for vendor approvals and traffic route management than for navigating palace-level scandal, was in full-blown damage control mode. The Meghan situation had gone nuclear. The palanquin proposal had been denied, leaked, and ridiculed. The crowd at the parade had booed. A hot mic had caught Meghan muttering, "This is beneath me." And now? Now the press was circling. What they wanted, receipts. Proof. Evidence that Meghan had indeed made such an audacious request. At first, the committee resisted. But then came the email. Dated November 3rd, 2025. Subject line. Final confirmation of enhanced staging for Duchess of Sussex appearance. It wasn't just incriminating. It was detailed, line by line. The email laid out what Meghan's team had requested and what the committee had refused. It included references to the palanquin, descriptions of the attendants' uniforms, requests for lighting adjustments, music cues, alternate camera angles for live broadcast. But it also included something even more shocking, an addendum titled Narrative Control and Crisis Contingency Suggestions. That part was explosive. Because while the rest of the email could be chalked up to excessive planning, celebrity ego, or poor judgment, this section revealed something darker. A premeditated strategy to reshape public reaction if things went sideways. The addendum, reportedly added by one of Meghan's senior advisors, laid out several contingency talking points in the event of public pushback, including frame the procession as symbolic of female empowerment across cultures, emphasize Meghan's biracial identity to pivot away from perceptions of elitism. If necessary, invoke mental health terminology to justify elevated staging as a comfort/security issue. Leverage past press trauma to refocus narrative on resilience. Let that sink in. Before the public had even seen the palanquin plan, before a single photo had leaked, before Meghan had taken a single step on that parade route, her team had already drafted the blueprint for damage control. They knew it might backfire, and they were prepared to gaslight it into something noble. To some observers, this wasn't just PR. It was manipulation. And when this email landed in the inbox of a freelance entertainment journalist known for taking down celebrity hypocrisy, the dam broke. She sat on it for less than 24 hours. Then she published it, word for word, under the headline. Exclusive. Leaked email reveals Meghan Markle's parade power play and pre-planned PR spin. The article hit just as the hot mic clip was peaking, and together, it was a perfect storm, one that even Meghan's fiercest defenders struggled to spin. Because this time, it wasn't tabloid speculation. It was a primary source, and it changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just about a float, or a costume, or a bad day on the boulevard. It was about intent. It was about perception versus reality, about a public figure who claimed to speak truth to power, but privately strategized how to repackage public backlash as victimhood. And it struck a nerve, because for years, Meghan's most passionate critics had been labeled toxic, bigoted, irrational. But now, even moderates, even those who once believed in her story, were beginning to ask the uncomfortable question, what if we've been played? The email hit the internet like a dagger wrapped in gold ribbon. Within hours of its publication, it was screenshotted, reposted, translated, dissected, and debated by everyone from blue-check political pundits to anonymous Reddit sleuths. The words weren't hypothetical. They weren't speculation. They were hard evidence. Meghan Markle's team had not only planned the palanquin, they had war-gamed the outrage. And the public? The public was furious. What began as a parade scandal had evolved into something deeper, more symbolic. This wasn't just about a woman trying to ride above the crowd. It was about a celebrity who allegedly built a platform on justice, equality, and anti-royalism, while plotting behind the scenes how to spin palatial excess as feminist resilience. By day 2, the story had gone global. The Guardian called it a masterclass in public relations miscalculation. CNN ran a segment titled, The Meghan Dilemma, Activism or Aristocracy? Even The View, historically friendly to Meghan, turned sour. Sunny Hostin, once a vocal supporter, sighed on air and said, "It's hard to defend this. Really hard." But perhaps most damaging of all was what happened in corporate boardrooms. Because while the public was busy tweeting and meme-ing, brands were making calls. And one of them made a very bold decision. Sugar Frost, a major candy sponsor of the parade, and one of the corporate partners quietly tied to Meghan's upcoming holiday-themed product campaign, issued a terse, 5-sentence statement. While we believe in elevating women's voices and empowering visionary leaders, recent revelations regarding the Hollywood Christmas parade have led us to reevaluate certain partnerships. We will not be moving forward with any promotional activations related to American Riviera Orchard at this time. Translation? We're out. The same brand that had reportedly considered a cross-collaboration involving Meghan's artisan preserves and their seasonal gift baskets had just backed away publicly. Not quietly, not internally, publicly. They wanted the world to know, we don't want to be associated with this. And Meghan? She was blindsided. According to a source close to the situation, the reaction inside her Montecito home was pure disbelief. She kept saying, we had a story. We had a story. Like the whole situation was something she could still steer if people just understood the vision. But the problem wasn't the story. It was the pattern. And brands, especially ones built on family-friendly messaging and sugary nostalgia, weren't willing to gamble on a spokesperson whose brand had become synonymous with contradiction. Behind the scenes, more dominoes began to fall. A luxury home goods company that had sent Meghan samples for possible collaboration went silent. A high-end candle line quietly scrubbed her from their vision board deck. A fashion house reportedly postponed talks about a spring editorial campaign indefinitely. To the public, it seemed like Meghan was still in the spotlight. But behind closed doors, that spotlight was starting to flicker. And the email leak hadn't just wounded her reputation. It had triggered institutional recoil. Industry insiders began saying the quiet part out loud. Meghan wasn't just high risk. She was unpredictable. One unnamed studio executive reportedly said in a leaked voice note, she doesn't understand tone. She thinks everything can be rebranded. But sometimes, you have to read the room. But there was still one place where tone mattered most, where a single word, spoken or left unspoken, could redefine everything. And it wasn't in LA. It was across the Atlantic. Because Buckingham Palace had seen the headlines. They had read the email. And though they said nothing publicly, internally, a conversation was taking place. A conversation Meghan could never have prepared for. Because the Windsors weren't laughing. They weren't rolling their eyes. They were preparing a response, quiet, deliberate, and wrapped not in sarcasm, but in constitutional ice. What came next would make the palanquin scandal look like a sideshow. You could feel it in the air, the slow, deliberate tightening of Hollywood's velvet rope. Not slammed shut, not yet, but ever so gently moving out of reach. And Meghan? She could feel it too. Because the worst part of backlash in this town isn't the punchline. It's the withdrawal, the pulling away, the ghosting, the invitations that dry up without explanation, the once gushing magazine editors who suddenly stop taking your publicist's calls, the stylists who are fully booked, the glam squads who subtly push you to the fringes of the VIP seating chart, and then the ultimate cold front. Silence from your allies. Let's talk about the Oprah vacuum. When Meghan and Harry first exploded onto the American media landscape post-royal exit, it was Oprah Winfrey who rolled out the red carpet, literally. Her backyard interview with the couple in 2021 was a cultural earthquake. Ratings gold. Meme heaven. A safe space that reshaped the public's understanding of their palace ordeal. But now, in the wake of Palanquin Gate, Oprah said nothing. No supportive post. No curated Instagram quote about rising above hate. No subtle PR pivot via her network. Just silence. And in Oprah's world, silence is an absence. It's intentional, but it wasn't just her. Gayle King, Oprah's media confidant and longtime morning show anchor, made a cryptic comment during a panel on celebrity image repair. I think sometimes people fall in love with the idea of reinvention, but forget that reinvention starts with listening, not performing. A mic drop in disguise. Then came the subtle, brutal disinvites. Multiple insiders confirmed that Meghan had originally been floated for a brief cameo, non-speaking, in a star-studded holiday PSA backed by a major streaming platform. One of those feel-good, all are welcome here montage spots. Her name? Quietly pulled from the draft call sheet after the Palanquin fallout. Not because she wasn't still a big name, but because she was now a divisive one. And brands? They don't like risk. Not the kind that trends on TikTok for all the wrong reasons. Even more painful was the shift from her former professional peers. Actors who had once stood beside her at premieres, posed for Vogue shoots together, even filmed adjacent scenes in her Suits days. Enter Patrick J. Adams. Yes, that Patrick, Meghan's former on-screen husband, Mike Ross, from Suits. Their chemistry had been electric. Their friendship, seemingly unshakable. When Meghan became royalty, he cheered. When she stepped away from the monarchy, he posted support. But in 2025, he stayed quiet until he didn't. At a panel on ethics in celebrity storytelling, Adams was asked about the rising tension between public personas and private behavior in Hollywood. His response: measured, devastating. The story you tell the world can't be miles apart from the choices you make behind closed doors. You can't preach equality while building a throne. People notice. No names, no hashtags, but everyone knew. And Meghan? She noticed too, because that wasn't just any comment. That was from someone who knew her before the crown. Someone who had seen the woman, not the myth, not the marketing. And for him to say that, it hit different. Back in Montecito, her inner circle, once robust with stylists, brand consultants, ghostwriters, spiritual advisors, and social media whisperers, began shrinking. One by one, quietly. Some left without announcement. Others took a step back. A few simply stopped replying. Because in Hollywood, nothing is louder than a text thread that suddenly goes dead. Even her charity liaisons were treading water. One representative from a California-based education nonprofit, which had been in early talks with Meghan's team for a youth initiative, told the Los Angeles Times off the record, "We love the message, but now it just feels complicated." Translation: they didn't want their good work tainted by a brand that had veered into self-parody. And here's the deeper irony, the one that cut through every meme and mockery. Meghan had once been the underdog, the outsider who married into one of the world's most exclusive institutions and dared to walk away. She had sparked global conversations about race, royalty, motherhood, and media abuse. She had made people believe in resilience. But now the story had flipped. She was no longer the outsider. She was the one demanding to be carried. Not in metaphor, in practice. And that betrayal of the original narrative? Hollywood couldn't forgive that. Because the machine doesn't mind drama. It thrives on it. What it can't tolerate: inauthenticity that makes them look complicit. The industry had played along. But the palanquin email, the narrative control plan, that made them look like fools. Like co-conspirators in a campaign of curated delusion. And no one wants to be the last person holding the bag when the mask slips. So they dropped the bag. Quietly. Swiftly. Unceremoniously. One producer. One agent. One friend at a time. Meghan hadn't just lost a parade float. She'd lost her footing. And as she retreated into her Montecito estate, windows drawn, meetings canceled, statements drafted and redrafted, one thought echoed louder than any chant on Hollywood Boulevard. What do you do when the kingdom you built from scratch turns its gates on you? It was the silence that said everything. No royal rebuke. No dramatic press statement. No defiant Instagram post. No damage control sit-down. Just silence. From the one person whose voice could have changed the entire narrative in a single breath, Oprah Winfrey. For years, Meghan Markle had basked in the glow of Oprah's media magic. That 2021 interview didn't just change public perception. It baptized Meghan's post-royal image in emotional truth. The lighting was soft, the questions piercing but kind, and the outcome legendary. Oprah didn't just give Meghan a platform. She gave her credibility. She passed the torch, and Meghan carried it into Hollywood like an emblem of validation. But in the days following the parade fiasco, the palanquin scandal, the leaked email, the booze, the hot mic, the yacht princess chants, Oprah stayed quiet. Brilliantly, uncomfortably, deliberately quiet. And in Hollywood? Silence from Oprah is not passive. It's surgical, because Oprah Winfrey understands narrative better than anyone in media. She understands when to uplift and when to withhold, which made what happened next all the more explosive. Because while Oprah said nothing, Gayle King, her trusted confidant, co-anchor, and de facto surrogate in the media, spoke. And not just once, but with a precision that felt more like an ice pick than a statement. Let's rewind to the CBS morning show, just 4 days after the parade incident went viral. Gayle, co-anchoring as usual, was covering a segment on celebrity reputation rebounds, a fluffy, low-stakes filler story. The panel discussed Robert Downey Jr., Lindsay Lohan, even Britney Spears. And then, one guest brought up Meghan Markle. The table fell quiet for a beat. And Gayle? She took a slow sip of coffee, smiled, and said, "Redemption arcs are powerful, but they start with owning the fall." That was it. One line. Not accusatory, not even directed. But the internet knew. The clip went viral in hours. People clipped the segment, froze on her smirk, looped it with dramatic music. Twitter lit up. Did Gayle just drag Meghan without saying her name? And for once, even Meghan's defenders struggled to spin it. Because Gayle had never once publicly criticized Meghan. She'd supported the couple, defended them against British tabloid attacks, gently reinforced the victim narrative. But now, she was cool, measured, detached, and that detachment was louder than any headline. Behind the scenes, speculation erupted. Had Oprah pulled away? Had Gayle broken ranks? Were they trying to reclaim distance after becoming too entangled in Meghan's increasingly erratic media orbit? A former executive producer who had worked with OWN, Oprah Winfrey Network, told The Hollywood Chronicle off the record, Oprah's brand is emotional intelligence. She'll walk you into your own truth. But she won't let you weaponize hers. In other words, Meghan had stepped too far, and the matriarchs of media were stepping back. But the most dramatic moment was yet to come. Because Gayle King, ever the seasoned media tactician, didn't stop at the morning show. 2 nights later, at a private media industry dinner hosted by Netflix, an intimate affair attended by journalists, showrunners, and streaming